here, baby. You know you drive me up a wall, the way you make good for all the nasty tricks you pull. Seems like we're making up more than we're making love. And it always seems you got something on your mind other than me. Girl, you got to change your crazy ways. You hear me? Say you're leaving on a 7:30 train and that you're heading out to Hollywood. Giving me the line so many times it kinda gets like feeling bad looks good. Yeah, that kind of loving turns a man to a slave. That kind of loving sends a man right to his grave. I go crazy, crazy.
Hello, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patronage, and thank you for listening. This is Emmanuel, Isaiah Smith, your host, and this is the EIS Media Group lecture series. Today's date is Friday, April 17th, 2026, and the time is 12:37 p.m. I am here in Miami-Dade County, Florida, and welcome to today's lecture. The title of today's lecture is MK Ultra Part 5, Experiential Narratives. And I'll let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that I tend to do these lectures outdoors, and I may have to raise or project my voice from time to time in order to drown out the background noise. Please adjust your volume accordingly, and thank you for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, simply put, the reason that Project MK Ultra caught my eye the first time I came across those documents was because these documents helped me see very clearly that governments, even governments in democratically inclined nations, and constitutionally inclined nations like the United States, are capable of atrocious things. Furthermore, the reason that I decided to do lectures on Project MK Ultra is because, quite frankly, ladies and gentlemen, there have not been any Senate hearings on gang stalking. There haven't been any congressional hearings on gang stalking. There haven't been any in-depth news articles on gang stalking. There haven't been any in-depth journalistic discussions on clandestine gang stalking. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, there have been very few reliable and experiential books printed on the matter. And trust me, I've come across hundreds of books, if not thousands of books online about gang stalking that I flipped through and found no reliable data or information in any of the books at all. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, I have come to the conclusion, as a researcher, as a journalist, as a chief executive officer, and as an editor-in-chief, concerning the materials that I found online about gang stalking, and that is that it is derivative and it's condensed. Okay? There's not a lot of reliable information out there about gang stalking. That points to a number of variables that might cause one to question the reliability of the authors of those documents, of those books, of those journals, of those news articles. Who's tampering with them? If no one's tampering with them, then why is the data that I'm seeing so inconclusive and so unreliable? Okay? My job is to bring you experiential, engaging, reliable, and factual information on clandestine gang stalking and derivative products. And MK Ultra was essentially one of the progenitors of gang stalking. Okay, I've oftentimes said that Operation COINTELPRO, which was an FBI program, and Operation MK Ultra, which was a CIA program, are both the progenitors of gang stalking. Okay, gang stalking was molded from the blueprint that COINTELPRO and MK Ultra started. Okay, we have had Senate hearings and congressional hearings on COINTELPRO. We've had Senate hearings and congressional hearings on MK Ultra. Now we need Senate hearings and congressional hearings on gang stalking in the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, MK Ultra, its auspices, its operation, its price tag gives you, the viewer, some clue, some hint, some semblance, some realization as to what a country is capable of if it is not properly observed, if it is not properly vetted, if oversight gets too weak on programs of a consequential nature like Project MK Ultra. Okay? That's not to say the United States is the only one. I'm sure every government in every country in the entire world has at some point, particularly in the technology age, carried out experiments of a covert nature on their populations. It's a situation where governments risk their credibility in order to gain further insights into human behavior, the human mind, the human psyche, human motivations, human ambitions, the capacity for human beings to want something, to desire something, to decide on this action or that action, as opposed to those actions or these actions. Governments want to know as much about human behavior, human motivations, and human desire as possible, so that they can develop more comprehensive, more effective, and more sophisticated governing techniques that will enhance society and make society better, make the country better, make the citizens better than they ever have been. But what happens when U.S. citizens are seen as expendable in the wake of these government ambitions towards understanding human behavior. We begin to see a trend, we begin to see a pattern of governmental behavior that is shocking in its nature. Ladies and gentlemen, I've oftentimes said if governments were turned off and people were left to themselves, within the first year of that situation, it would be raining blood in the streets. Okay? The human mind is not particularly inclined to justice in and of itself. That's why governments adopt judicial systems or justice systems or governmental systems. To keep a lid on the worst of human behavior that there is. Those are behaviors you want to avoid. Those are behaviors that you want to limit. Those are behaviors that you want to contain. Indeed, those are human behaviors that you want to eradicate. But until that's possible, you must understand the human mind. But there are better ways, ladies and gentlemen. Do paid studies. Do paid surveys. Do paid investigations so people are volunteering their time at a premium. All right? Not necessarily volunteering their time, but they're giving you their time at a premium. All right, if you're a government and you want to know more about the human mind, pay for that information. Pay your subjects and do your experiments in a safe, controlled environment. All right, don't do like they did to Dr. Frank Olson, who was a Army researcher, an Army biologist, a very renowned doctor in his field, a scientist, as it were, a man of research, a man of investigations, a man of the scientific method. Don't do to U.S. citizens like they did to Dr. Frank Olson. Okay? When Dr. Frank Olson was at a Army gathering of doctors, this was in the mid-1950s, Dr. Sidney Godaleb, who was the chief doctor, okay, of the MK Ultra project, wanted to experiment on Dr. Frank Olson. While Dr. Frank Olson wasn't looking. And as it turned out, Dr. Sidney Godaleb saw that Dr. Frank Olson's liquor bottle, all right, Dr. Frank Olson was enjoying a glass of Cointreau liquor. Dr. Sidney Godaleb saw that open bottle of liquor and knew what he had to do. All right, Dr. Godaleb walked right over to Dr. Olson's bottle of liquor and spiked it with LSD so that he could monitor Dr. Olson's behavior while on the drug and document the data associated with that behavior. But as it turns out, that fateful day would be one of Dr. Olson's last days. This man, who was a respected clinician in his field, he had a wife, he had 3 kids, he had a promising career ahead of him, he had a promising life ahead of him. But after that fateful day, Dr. Olson began to slowly lose his mind as a result of the effects of the LSD that Dr. Godaleb threw in his drink as a part of Project MK Ultra. Over the next week, Dr. Olson's mental health got markedly worse, and he ended his own life while seeking treatment in New York City by jumping off the 10th story of the Statler Hotel in New York City, ending his own life, leaving behind a wife and 3 kids, who would later sue the federal government and get a settlement of about $750,000, which in the 1970s was about the equivalent to about $3 million. In today's hyperinflated world, it just goes to show, ladies and gentlemen, that while there are obviously good things about the U.S. government, there are good things about all governments. There are always going to be instances. Well, there shouldn't be instances, but history has taught us that until we find a way to effectively root out government incompetence, from time to time you're going to see incompetent people in government. And they're going to run programs like MK Ultra. They're going to run programs like gang stalking, thinking that they're putting one over on the American people, and they're not. So, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to do is we're going to get into the lecture today. This is Project MK Ultra Part 5. This is Experiential Narratives. I have 10 documents here, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm going to read from. And what I'm about to do is we're going to get into these documents. I'm going to read them. And I am going to examine them, and we are going to draw comparisons to the gang stalking mechanism, ladies and gentlemen. All of these documents are official. All of these documents are readily available online, and all of these documents are legally admissible, ladies and gentlemen. The first document that we're going to read is a document from the To The Point magazine, dated 9th of September 1977. Ladies and gentlemen, To The Point magazine was a Rhodesian magazine. Rhodesia is in South Africa. It's in Southern Africa, and it was a very popular Rhodesian magazine in the 1970s. Rhodesia was later changed in name to Zimbabwe, so most people know the name Zimbabwe as the name of the Southern African region. Rhodesia is what was what the country was called beforehand. So this is this is from the To The Point magazine. It's dated September 9th, 1977. This particular article is called The Point Report. And the title of this article is CIA Drugs Brainwashing Program, Inside Story. And this document was approved for release on August 20th, 2007 by the CIA. And we're going to begin. It says, is there a pill which can make a man give away secrets and then forget that he has revealed them? A potion to make a drunken man sober, or one to prevent a sober one from becoming drunk no matter how much alcohol he downs. A way of treating normal tasting food so that an unsuspecting eater will turn into a confused neurotic full of fears and anxieties. The Central Intelligence Agency still does not know, but it spent almost a quarter of a century and 21 million of the taxpayers' money to find the answers to those and many similar questions. In 1975, an inquiry committee threw some light on a number of CIA programs involving the use of hallucinogenic drugs. Among other things that were then brought out was the truth about the death of Frank Olson, a biochemist working for the Department of the Army who threw himself out of a hotel in New York on November 28, 1953. It turned out that he had served unknowingly as a guinea pig in a CIA experiment with LSD. It was believed that at the time that most of the documents related to those CIA programs had been destroyed. That has since been proven false. Only a few weeks ago, 7 boxes containing 8,000 pages of records were found in the midst of stored CIA accounting papers. The records give a good idea of the extent of the CIA's studies of human behavior, a euphemism which covered an extraordinary variety of offensive as well as defensive experiments in brainwashing and worse. The facts that emerged were confirmed on August 3rd at a joint hearing of the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Health Subcommittee by Admiral Stansfield Turner, the new CIA director. Turner was able to tell the hearing, "I assure you that the CIA is in no way engaged in either witting or unwitting testing of drugs today, but no one could erase what had gone before." Under cover of a program codenamed Bluebird, later rechristened Artichoke, with offshoots like MK Ultra and MK Delta, before being put down the memory hole in 1973, the CIA carried out 149 experiments connected with the brainwashing in the United States and Canada. 80 different institutions, including universities, prisons, pharmaceutical laboratories, and hospitals, took part in the tests, often without realizing the purpose or knowing who was behind the programming. The test included the use of hallucinogenics, hypnosis, and physical and mental exhaustion of subjects. The subjects were not always told what was in store for them. I guess the institutes, and once a prestidigitator was brought in to make suggestions. Looking back on it, Artichoke was born of Cold War paranoia. The high treason trial of Cardinal Mansetsi had just been staged in Budapest. The prelate's robot behavior, his haggard eyes, and his mechanical functions impressed anyone who had read Arthur Koestler's Darkness at Noon, the story behind the Stalin Purge trials in the Soviet Union in the 1930s. When it was launched in 1949, Artichoke may have been essentially a defensive program intended to learn how to insulate American agents against what CIA chiefs feared were potent brainwashing and mind control techniques developed by the Soviets and the Chinese. But offensive concepts were quickly brought in. A memorandum on January 25, 1952 spoke of the need to perfect a way to get information from an individual against his will, and without his knowing he had given it. That memo went on to speculate whether there was a way to gain such ground over an individual's mind that he would obey orders not only against his will, but against such fundamental laws of nature as a self-preservation. The CIA, both in the political context of the times and in line with the needs of any secret service, hoped to use behavior control and to crack enemy mental defenses, or to program its own agents for any mission. What was wanted was a way to turn amnesia on and off. It might be to question an enemy's spy without his remembering that he had given away his superiors. It might be to erase the memories of CIA agents to the point of retiring, and they might be tempted by the thought of writing their memoirs about what went on inside the company. The Army and the CIA shared that same concern in those days, and the Pentagon worked with the intelligence services on some projects. Hallucinogenic tests were carried out on thousands of soldiers between 1956 and 1974. A high Army officer rhapsodized at the 1975 Senate inquiry on the possibilities of drugging enemy regiments for a few hours, making for victories without bloodshed. Under Project Artichoke, the CIA also worked at times with the Office of Naval Research, more often how the covers for tests were private research foundations. CIA money was unsuspectingly accepted by the likes of Josiah Macy Jr. of the Josiah Macy Jr. Foundation, one of the world's most respected in the field of medical research. And the bottom of this is a little cut off, but it says intelligence agency set up its own front organizations to cover its projects, calling it the Society for the Investigation of Human Equality. Then we have among the tests financed by that society were some investigations of brainwashing carried out at Montreal's McGill University. Some 30 nurses spent a half hour at regular intervals in a blacked out, soundproofed room, and their reactions were recorded. One of the nurses had to be hospitalized some months later as a schizophrenic. Well, over the years, Artichoke moved into neuropsychiatry, the effects of hypnosis, of lacks of sleep and food, of electroshocks or ultrasounds beyond the range of human hearing, or hard drugs. Sexual pathology was touched on, as was telepathy. The guinea pigs were as varied as the range of experiments. Drug addicts were given shots of morphine as a recompense for their test rolls. Students were given checks, soldiers extra furloughs, cancer patients were promised painkillers, but sexual psychopaths and the mentally ill simply were not told about the test, so they did not have to be paid. In 1953, the CIA signed up a magician and gave him essentially 2,600 Rhodesian to draft a manual on applied legerdemain, useful perhaps on cloak and dagger missions, for slipping one of those magic potions in an enemy agent's glass. In the 1950s, the CIA sent some operational talents to Europe and Asia. There would be a psychiatrist, a hypnotist, an interrogation specialist locked in a safe house, the team having questioned day after day an agent whose loyalty had become suspect. For good measure, the suspect would be given truth serum injections of pentobarbital. One of the spies who got the full treatment was a Viennese count who promised to turn over a Soviet cipher. When Admiral Turner was asked by the Senate investigators whether he had been able to draw any useful conclusions from the midnight orgasm reports, the CIA director answered with a laconic no. It was on that occasion that he assured that the inquiry, and then it kind of cuts off there, but I can pretty much finish that part for you. It basically talks about how Admiral Stansfield Turner, who was the director of the CIA during these Senate hearings, said that he was not aware that there were CIA brothels where the tricks and the johns who were purchasing the services of the prostitutes were being experimented on by the CIA while they were purchasing sexual products from prostitutes. He's saying that he thought that that was deplorable, and that it was one area of the CIA's MK Ultra program that needed oversight that he wasn't able to give because he didn't know that that project was running. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to review this, but towards the end you'll notice where it talks about some of the experiments in MK Ultra were told that they were being experimented on, and then others were not told that they were being experimented on. And some of the people that were not told that they were being experimented on were called by this author as guinea pigs, because they were basically seen as expendable animals in the grand scheme of things. And these people were being experimented on by the CIA of the United States Department of Justice, and their lives were seen as useless pieces of debris in the grand scheme of things. It says here that there was a nurse that was subjected to CIA mind control techniques. I guess this is the 1970s here, or the early 1970s. All right, so this was one of the CIA's MK Ultra experiments that was conducted over in Canada. Because keep in mind, most of the MK Ultra project and its sub-projects, all 68 of them, were conducted here in the United States. But there were a number of MK Ultra products that were tried out in Canada as well. So one of the ones that was tried in Canada involved McGill University nurses. Where 30 nurses spent a half hour a day, well, actually a half hour at a time, multiple times a day, in a black soundproofed room, and their reactions were recorded. And one of the nurses was apparently turned schizophrenic by that experiment. Furthermore, a lot of the people that the author of this journal calls guinea pigs, who were not told of the experiments that they were being subjected to, some of these people were subjected to these experiments 24 hours a day, using protocols that are very similar to clandestine gang stalking. Okay? That's why I oftentimes say, ladies and gentlemen, MK Ultra is one of the progenitors to gang stalking. Okay? Because like gang stalking, it involved subjecting people to human behavior experiments without their knowledge, in their personal and professional lives without telling them, and without paying them for their time as test subjects. Okay? The premise of this article, ladies and gentlemen, is that the CIA was looking for a one-size-fits-all mechanism by which to understand human behavior. All right, the CIA was trying to investigate if there was some magic pill or some magic chemical that could be given to a guy that would make him go into a stupor and tell all of his personal, deepest, darkest secrets to a stranger. Okay, like a one-size-fits-all truth serum. Right, that you could just put in a pill or a tablet form, hand it to somebody, and start asking them questions. All right, this was obviously something that they wanted to keep handy in case they ever got to capture an enemy spy from a foreign nation, and they could sit that person down, strap them to a chair, give them this magic pill, and make them tell all of their secrets as spies for a foreign entity. Okay, that was the core use of these MK Ultra mechanisms, was to ensure that in case of a capture of an enemy spy, they would be able to question that spy and get all the answers that they wanted. But they were attempting to use these interrogation experiments on the American public to see if it worked or not. And a lot of the people that these experiments were being used on didn't realize that they were being experimented on, and they were never told that they were being experimented on, ever. So it sort of got to the place where the CIA had more and more questions and more products and more experiments that it wanted to run on more and more Americans. And at some point, the damage that was being done to the psychological state of these American citizens that were being experimented on started becoming more and more apparent to people. People just started to see it. People in various government agencies that had knowledge of this program, and there were very few, mind you, there were very few. But there were so many bizarre occurrences that were happening that even the CIA started looking at its own program and saying, wow, you know what? Some of these experiments are having real damaging effects on people. But that didn't stop them. All right, they wanted to get the full scope of what it takes to grab the core, the root, okay, of the human psyche and expose it using chemicals as the catalyst, okay? So there were 21 million Rhodesian of the taxpayers' money spent trying to find the answers to these questions. 21 million Rhodesian dollars would probably be about the equivalent to 3 million American dollars used for experimentation purposes. It talks some about Dr. Frank Olson, which we covered earlier. It's when you talk about brainwashing, when you talk about human behavior experimentation, when you talk about truth serums and interrogation techniques, all of these things, yes, it's true. These techniques were being tried out on U.S. citizens, many without their knowledge, in a period of Cold War paranoia. Okay? Everything was about, well, what are the Russians doing? What kind of technology are the Russians experimenting with? What kind of weapons are the Russians using? What kind of technology are the Russians using to advance their military goals? What kind of chemicals are the Russians experimenting with? And how do we, the Americans, enrich our own scientific community with these same experiments? Furthermore, if we ever catch a Russian spy, how are we going to interrogate him or her and make her spill the beans, make him spill the beans, make them tell us everything they know about their spying operation? Okay, let's try LSD. Let's try electroshocks. Let's try putting them in padded rooms with no sound and no lights. Let's try using injections of heroin and other narcotics. Let's try strapping them to a bed and subjecting them to unnamed chemicals and biological agents to see if that causes them to tell the truth about this or that or that or this or what have you. Okay? It was twofold, the experiments that the CIA was running. They wanted to learn more about human behavior, and they also wanted to know what works on a spy to make them tell the truth about their foreign spying operation. And they were using these tests. The test subjects that they were using were actual U.S. citizens, and they did a lot of damage to them. So the next article is going to be from the Washington Star, July 16th, 1977. The CIA admits wider drug tests on civilians. This is by Walter Taylor, a Washington Star staff writer. The article reads, secret CIA drug experiments on American civilians may have been more widespread than previously disclosed. Adam Stansfield Turner, director of the intelligence agency, revealed yesterday. In a letter to Senator Daniel Inouye, chairman of the Senate and Intelligence Committee, Turner said that an internal CIA investigation had discovered documents suggesting that there were possible additional cases of drugs being tested on American citizens without their knowledge during the 1950s and early 1960s. The White House made the letter available to reporters late yesterday, but Presidential Press Secretary Jody Powell was able to give much additional information on the nature of the drug experiments beyond what was contained in Turner's letter. Powell said he was unable to say whether the newly discovered documents revealed any additional deaths or injuries related to CIA drug experiments. Turner's letter, which was hand-carried to Inouye on Capitol Hill, said that the CIA investigation indicated that individuals on whom the drugs were tested included drug addicts, alcoholics, and cancer patients. Investigations in 1975 by the Senate committee and by a White House commission headed by then Vice President Nelson A. Rockefeller first disclosed a variety of secret drug experiments conducted by the CIA during the 1950s and 60s and traced a number of deaths to the programs. Among those who died was an Army researcher who committed suicide after being given LSD without his knowledge, and another man who was given mescaline at a New York City mental hospital. Both of these cases occurred in 1953. The newly discovered information, according to Turner's letter, bears on a project conducted by the CIA from 1953 to 1964 and known to the agency as MK Ultra. During the 1975 Senate investigations, at which time Senator Frank Church of Idaho was the chairman of the panel, the intelligence agency reported that most records of the super secret program sorry, I lost my place. Give me 1 second. Had been destroyed. Thus, congressional probers were given only sketchy information about MKUltra experiments. Turner told Inouye that the newly discovered records were turned up by our continuing search for drug-related as well as other documents. The CIA director who took over for the agency just this year was President Carter's appointee, characterized the new material as primarily of a financial nature. Although Turner's letter was made public, the White House did not release any of the documents cited in it. Powell said Turner was still very much in the process of reviewing the material and as yet had not made any of it available even to Inouye. Turner stressed in the letter that he did not believe the information had been deliberately withheld from the Senate committee previously. Let me hasten to add that I am persuaded that there was no previous attempt to conceal this material in the original 1975 exploration. The material recently discovered was in the retired archives filed under financial accounts and only uncovered by using extraordinary and extensive search efforts. Turner also renewed assurances by the agency that the activities disclosed by the documents had been discontinued more than a decade ago and did not take place today. Because the documents were of a financial nature, the CIA chief said they do not present a complete picture of the drug-related experiments. He added, however, that they do provide more detail than was previously available to us. Beyond the fact that the experiments may have been more widespread than previously known, Turner said that the records also indicate that research on surreptitious methods of administering drugs has taken place. Neither the letter nor Powell shed any light on where the experiments on drug addicts, alcoholics, and cancer patients were conducted. Turner said the cancer patients were involved in research involving knockout drugs. While identifying it, Turner's letter said the records indicate the possibility of an improper payment to a private institution in connection with the experiments. Briefing reporters, Powell declined even to characterize the type of institution involved. Powell said that he anticipated that the Senate committee would want to hold hearings on the newly discovered material, but said that Turner still was examining the information and was not yet ready to testify. Turner said in his letter that he needed time to finish reading the fairly voluminous material involved so that he could have a complete picture of when he appeared before the committee. Powell said that the material first came to Turner's attention only last Tuesday. On Thursday, the press secretary said that Turner involved President Walter F. Mondale, who in turn notified the president. Powell said that Mondale has also discussed the material with Inouye and expressed the administration's desire for hearings on the new documents. Powell cautioned reporters not to attempt to circumstantially link any of the activities cited in Turner's letter to past or present CIA officials or to any previous administrations without further information. We certainly do not know at this point about that kind of information, he said. And ladies and gentlemen, I am going to do a rundown and an analysis of this document. Please give me 60 seconds to grab a glass of water, and I will be right back. Thank you very much. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I am back. I needed to rehydrate myself and move to a different location than I was previously. We will be continuing the lecture here. And ladies and gentlemen, this article is one that is very eye-opening. The CIA has admitted in an attempt to clear its corporate conscience that drugs and chemicals, various agents that are meant to have physiological effects on the human brain were used during Project MKUltra on people without their knowledge. Now, Admiral Turner, who is the director of the CIA at this time, is saying that these drugs were used on drug addicts, alcoholics, and cancer patients. Okay? He's not talking about using these drugs on prostitutes. He's not talking about using these drugs on incarcerated people. All right, he's not talking about using these drugs on paraplegics. All right, he's not talking about using these drugs on AIDS patients. Okay, he's not talking about using these drugs on people who are on life support. Okay, he's not talking about using these drugs on people who have had frontal lobotomies. Okay, he's talking about having used these chemicals in an experimental way on alcoholics, drug addicts, and cancer patients. Now, this strikes me as a bit odd, okay? Because for one, these people, these alcoholics, these drug addicts, and these cancer patients, they're not aware of what's happening, so you don't have to pay them for their time. All right, if I conduct an experiment on you, and it's the experiments of a biological nature, okay, and the experiment involves the use of chemicals or other drugs, and I use these chemicals on you without your knowledge in an experimental fashion, I don't have to pay you for your time as a test subject. I can gather the data from the experiment and use it all the same, whether or not you're aware of it and whether or not I have to pay you for your time as a test subject. You see, part of this program, okay, and this has been admitted, was testing drugs, chemicals, and biological agents on U.S. citizens, period, without their knowledge. They didn't have to be a drug addict. They didn't have to be an alcoholic. They didn't have to be a cancer patient. They didn't have to be a felon. They didn't have to be anything. You could be a perfectly healthy American living a perfectly healthy life. Like Dr. Frank Olson, for example. And the CIA would still subject you to chemical experiments. Okay, what Admiral Turner is saying here just simply isn't true. Okay, you don't have to be somebody that society would consider as defective or a goner or somebody who is so deficient in their thinking or their movements that they have no use to themselves, their community, or society, that those are the people you do the experiments on. No, they do the experiments on who they want to do the experiments on. You don't have to be somebody that is in a place where you've not been able to contribute to society or what have you. I mean, we've seen documents, ladies and gentlemen, where people who were drug addicts, for example, that were subjected to these MK Ultra experiments, they were given morphine as payment for their time, allowing the CIA to experiment on them. You see, drug addicts were given their drug of choice as payment for these experiments. Okay? The CIA was very cost effective when administering these experiments on people. The CIA was very cost effective. Okay, they wanted to save as much money as possible. And if you want to experiment on tens of thousands of Americans or even hundreds of thousands of Americans over a 20-year period, you got to be cost effective, because that's a big operation. And it's a multi-state operation, and it even included parts of Canada to this MK Ultra. Okay, it included dozens upon dozens of corporate entities, including businesses and prisons and hospitals and colleges, clinics and rehab centers, army laboratories and bases. I mean, there were so many locations and so many different kinds of test subjects. This was a monumental experiment of epic proportions. And it was all aimed at gathering data on human behavior. Ladies and gentlemen, you have to be cost effective, okay? I mean, they did not pay all of their test subjects. They paid some of them, but they didn't pay all of them. The ones that you test on without their knowledge, you don't have to pay them. You can save money that way. You don't have to pay them for their time. You can save money that way. But as we've read, ladies and gentlemen, people who were drug addicts, they were given shots of morphine as payment for their roles in the test. Students, now you have to pay them. All right, if a student allows you, a college student allows you to do an experiment on them, you got to pay them cash or a check. If you're a soldier in the U.S. Army and you're allowing the CIA to do experiments on you, they'll pay you in furloughs. All right. So ultimately, there were a number of types of clients that were not told about the project and were not paid. Okay, if you were considered a sexual deviant, maybe you were a convicted sex offender or something like that, you were not told about the experiment. The CIA would experiment on you as often as they pleased. All they'd have to do is find a way to find out your location, and then they could experiment on you with impunity. You know, if you were a hardened criminal and you were incarcerated, you know, you could be asked to do experiments by the prison doctor, and the prison doctor has been commissioned by the CIA to conduct experiments on prisoners. Okay? Furthermore, if you were a drug addict in one of these prisons, or maybe you were a drug addict seeking counseling at a rehab center, you could be experimented on without your knowledge. And then there were cancer patients who were bedridden, or perhaps they were cancer patients seeking treatment, like, I guess, radioactive treatment, etc. You could be experimented on during your cancer treatment. You didn't know that the CIA was behind it. You thought it was just your doctor administering these drugs, but the CIA gave your doctor the drugs and the chemicals to administer unto you during your chemo. All right, so the CIA was in the background, your doctor was in the foreground, and you were the patient. You were the experiment. You were the test subject. And a lot of hospitals ran tests on patients without their knowledge at the behest of the CIA, who was in the background organizing the testing. The CIA wanted to keep a low profile in these tests, especially the ones that involved hospitals and prisons. So we have, we're going to go back a little bit. Okay, so there was a handwritten letter that was delivered to Senator Daniel Inouye, who was the Democratic senator of Hawaii. It was from the office of the director of the CIA, and it admitted administering drug tests on unwitting citizens. And when I say drug test, I mean the testing of drugs. We're not talking about a urine sample to see who's on what drug. We're talking drugs that have been administered to U.S. citizens without their knowledge or consent to test the reaction on them physiologically. Okay, the director of the CIA is admitting this to Senator Inouye, and he's admitting it to him in documents. Okay, in documents, handwritten documents from his own office. Because Admiral Turner wants to be transparent about this. I think he's humiliated that his CIA was found to have been conducting experiments on people, behavior experiments on people, some without their knowledge. He's absolutely humiliated at this. Absolutely humiliated. And he wants to come clean. He doesn't want he doesn't want the U.S. Senate to see him as a complicit player in this. He wants to come clean. He's saying, yeah, some of this stuff I knew about. Some of this stuff I didn't know about. Some of the stuff that I'm hearing I think is deplorable. Some of this stuff I'm hearing I think is actionable with respect to lawsuits and legal remedies. He's saying some of this stuff I'm hearing about I think is disgusting. For example, the CIA brothels. Okay? So Admiral Turner's doing his best to come clean about all this, and this is how he's doing it. He's giving letters to U.S. senators and making it public that, yeah, we did tests on people without their knowledge. Furthermore, we saw an interesting bit of information too, where some people found some documents related to Project MK Ultra. When it was thought that all the documents had been destroyed, the CIA wanted all these documents destroyed. The CIA didn't want any part of Project MK Ultra to get out. Okay, especially Dr. Sidney Godaleb, who was the head doctor. There's no telling how many people he killed doing chemical experiments without their knowledge or consent. There is no telling. Okay, Frank Olson was only the tip of the iceberg. All right? There's no telling how many people died from Sidney Godaleb's experiment where he put psychoactive chemicals in their food just to see what the effect would be. There's no telling how many Americans lost their life behind this man, okay? But Dr. Sidney Godaleb, when he retired, he attempted to destroy all records related to Project MK Ultra, but he was not able to. He was not able to. There were 8,000 additional documents that were kept sealed in an accounting room in the CIA's headquarters, and eventually those documents leaked out. So that's why we know about Project MK Ultra as a nation at this point in history, is those 8,000 documents about the project that leaked out. Otherwise, Dr. Sidney Godaleb was going to try to destroy all the documents related to Project MK Ultra, and he did a waiver saying that basically these documents were retired and were of no longer any use to the CIA and should be destroyed. But that's not what his purpose was. He didn't want nobody to know about this project at all. But it leaked. It's kind of like gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, people thought that the word of this project was not that the word of Project Gang Stalking would never get out. They thought it'd be clandestine, covert, hidden, and secret forever. But that's just not how it works. Okay, governments are of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's a reciprocal relationship. The government provides for the people resources, auxiliaries, and components to facilitate the best possible life for each citizen. In return, the citizen gives the government its tax dollars so that the government will have the financial resources that it needs to give back to the people. You see, it's a reciprocal relationship. That reciprocity is what drives the citizen-government relationship. Okay? When the government goes to doing side projects like this and killing its citizens clandestinely with projects like MK Ultra, those kinds of things get exposed because they have no place in a civilized world, those kinds of projects. Quite simply put, if you're a government, and I cannot re-emphasize this enough, if you're a government and you wish to experiment on your citizens, pay them. Do controlled studies in laboratories and in research facilities and pay your subjects. You do not have to do clandestine experiments on your own citizens, regardless of what the effect will be on them. Okay, all that will do is it'll diminish the credibility of that government. It'll diminish the credibility of whatever government agency authorized those experiments. And it could make your country look bad on the world stage, particularly once these things are found out and made public. Okay, what do you think Emmanuel Isaiah Smith is doing? Your host. The man talking to you right now. What do you think I'm doing? I'm making gang stalking public so that the trajectory of my life can equal life, liberty, and happiness, okay, that has been promised to me by the founding documents of this country. That's what I'm after. The same opportunity to life, liberty, and happiness as anyone else. And if I'm being denied that through a covert operation called clandestine gang stalking, well, I'm going to have to do something about that. Because there's been very little in the way of national coverage on this thing. Okay, because it's hidden, it's covert, it's clandestine. So if you're a nationally broadcast or nationally syndicated news network, you're not always going to be able to look beneath the surface and say, wait a minute, there's something being talked about in Miami, Florida, or there's something being talked about in New York City, or there's something being talked about in Knoxville, Tennessee, or there's something being talked about in Houston, Texas, Los Angeles, California, Salt Lake City, Utah, Cleveland, Ohio, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Detroit, Michigan, St. Louis, Missouri, Boise, Idaho, Racine, Wisconsin, okay, Oregon, Washington State, Washington, D.C., Honolulu, Hawaii, Anchorage, Alaska, San Juan, Puerto Rico, okay? There's something being talked about in the United States and in U.S. territories, and it's called gang stalking. It's a covert, clandestine, hidden mechanism. There's not much government research that is public on this right now, but there are enough people talking about it to where it needs to be discussed on the national stage. Let's discuss that. On NBC, on MSNBC, on CBS News, on Fox, on Fox News, on Fox local affiliates, on C-SPAN. On foreign television, all over the world, because there are no doubt elected officials that are affected by this. It isn't just the citizenry. It's not just 9 to 5 people. It's not just middle class or upper middle class. It's not just wealthy or ultra wealthy. It's not just the impoverished. It's not the working poor. It's not just any one demographic. There are people across the racial spectrum that are getting they're beaten to a pulp by this program because they don't know what to look for. They don't know how to avoid stalkers. They don't know how to combat the menace. They don't know how to analyze what's happening to them. They don't know how to objectify what's happening. They don't know how to quantify what's happening. They don't know how to qualify what's just a bizarre occurrence and what's gang stalking. You have to be able to connect the dots once you learn how the program works, how it operates. And I've worked tirelessly over the past 10 years to bring you reliable information on that product, on that project. And we are going to bring an end to it, ladies and gentlemen, because it has no place in a civilized world. I know enough about myself to know that the trajectory of my life should follow a clear path, an unobstructed path. A path that needs to be trailblazed by me and me alone. If that path is being hindered by third parties that have no business being there, and they're doing it in a synchronized fashion, so much so, and so obviously so, and so pervasively so, that you know it's government activity, well, we need to talk about this. Okay, my goal is not to make the government of the United States look as bad as it could possibly look. Okay? The U.S. federal establishment, the U.S. government has done that on its own by allowing this program to continue operating. I want the U.S. federal government to look good on this. I want the U.S. federal government to be documented in history as having done the right thing, the fortuitous thing, the virtuous thing on clandestine gang stalking. Come forward about it. Let the American people know what it is, why it exists, how it exists, how much does it cost the U.S. taxpayer, what's its aims, what's its goals. How many other countries have you spread this to? Are you using it as a spying apparatus? And how are we going to make things right again? Okay, President Donald Trump has a campaign slogan that resonated with the American people. It resonated with the American voter. Make America great again. Okay? Let's make America sensible again. Because if we don't make America sensible, then chaos will prevail, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's look at the next document. It's going to be from the Chicago Sun-Times out of Chicago, Illinois. The date on this article is dated July 16th of 1977. More extensive CIA drug experiments told. The author of this particular article, the author is Patrick Auster from the Sun-Times Bureau. So it begins, Washington. The Central Intelligence Agency's program of drugging U.S. citizens without their knowledge in the 50s and the 1960s was even more extensive than had been previously disclosed, a White House official announced Friday. The new information, based on a recent search of CIA financial records, indicates that the following activities were undertaken as a part of the drug program known under the code name MK Ultra. Possible other cases involving drug testing on unwitting citizens, including drug addicts and alcoholics. Tests involving a knockout drug administered to patients suffering from the advanced stages of cancer. Research on this drug was performed in conjunction with work on development of painkillers for such patients. A possible improper payment to a private institution. Research on surreptitious methods of administering drugs. As far as it is known, no deaths were involved in this newly disclosed CIA activity, said White House Press Secretary Jody Powell, who made the data public. Previously, it had been disclosed that Dr. Frank Olson, a civilian biochemist for the Army, committed suicide by jumping out of a New York hotel window in 1953 while under the influence of a drug secretly administered to him by a CIA official as part of the MK Ultra program. Dr. Frank Olson was fed LSD in a glass of Cointreau shortly before his death. The new data were contained in a letter from CIA Director Stansfield Turner to Senator Daniel K. Inouye, chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, which monitors the agency's activities. The committee spokesman said it previously will hold hearings on the disclosures next week, with Turner expected to be there. Powell said President Carter, who learned of the new information Thursday in keeping with his campaign pledge to let the American people know of any CIA abuses of citizens' rights. And I'm going to continue. In his letter, Turner said that although the CIA previously told Congress that most of the MK Ultra files had been destroyed, our continuing search for drug-related as well as other documents has uncovered certain papers which bear on this matter. Turner stressed that the CIA had not attempted to control anything when asked for information on the program in 1975 by a Senate committee chaired by Frank Church, then investigating agency abuses. Turner said that the new information made known to him was found in retired archives, files being used only by extraordinary and extensive research efforts. The drug-related activities described in this newly located material began almost 25 years ago. I assure you they were discontinued over 10 years ago and do not take place today. Powell added that there is no possible information that there's no specific information or intelligence that he knows of that could be released that would further shed light on who the victims on the perpetrators of the programs were. In the final report of the Church Committee, it was disclosed during that the MK Ultra program first became known to those outside the program during a 1963 investigation by the CIA Inspector General. It was learned then that the program was the brainchild of former CIA Director Richard C. Helms, who at the time was the CIA's Assistant Deputy Director of Plans. The program's proposal was approved in 1953, and it was an active project until its discovery by the Inspector General 10 years later. After that, its budget was decreased markedly, and the program was put under tighter controls. It was reportedly phased out about 1967, although Alan Dulles, who was the CIA director between 1953 and 1961. John McCone held the post between 1961 and 1966. According to the final report, the program was designed to give the CIA comprehensive access to data, etc., etc. So this is an interesting article, ladies and gentlemen. It gets more into this knockout drug that was being given to cancer patients in the advanced stages of cancer, possibly as an end-of-life tool to make the person less distressed about their current medical condition and their impending demise because of that medical condition. There is a part in here about Dr. Frank Olson, the biochemist, the Army biochemist who was experimented on by Dr. Sidney Godaleb, and Dr. Olson leapt to his own death about a week later, having lost his mind because of the drug that Sidney Godaleb put in his Cointreau bottle. We've heard about various experiments that have been used on people who were in some way psychologically relaxed. For example, dope addicts, alcoholics, people who were on lots of drugs due to cancer medication. These people were being experimented on, but not exclusively. Okay, they were very healthy, very successful people like Dr. Frank Olson who were also experimented on. This was not an experiment for people who were just simply out of society or they had no capability to contribute into society. This was used on a lot of people. Of many different socioeconomic backgrounds. We have we learned that the Senate Intelligence Committee oversees the CIA. That's good to know, ladies and gentlemen. All right, it's good to know that the Senate Intelligence Committee is the committee that has general oversight over the CIA. What this tells me, ladies and gentlemen, is that the Senate Intelligence Committee should have been involved in MK Ultra all along. It was a huge risk to implement such a program and unleash it upon American society in the way that it was, without properly following set guidelines with respect to reporting. I mean, the director of the CIA didn't always know what was going on. Okay, MK Ultra was the brainchild of Richard C. Helms, who was the director of the CIA in the 1950 to 53 range. But Admiral Stansfield Turner, who was the CIA director in the 70s, didn't know everything that was going on in MK Ultra because he wasn't properly briefed on everything that was going on in MK Ultra. Okay, the orchestrators and the participants of MK Ultra were able to operate without much oversight. And they were able to take the law into their own hands. They were able to take the spirit of the program into their own hands. They were able to take the protocols and procedures of the program into their own hands, without as so much as a fax to the CIA director. All right, if the CIA director thought something bad was happening in this program, he could order it to stop. If it didn't stop, he could go to the Senate Intelligence Committee and say, hey, listen, this is Admiral Stansfield Turner, director of the CIA. I found that some employees of my institution have been participating in a program called MK Ultra, and we don't think that it ought to operate in the current capacity that it's operating in. Is there any way that you can step in and regulate this thing and give us some oversight? All right, there is not a single senator on that committee that would not have stood up to the plate and said, yeah, we don't mind. We'll use every resource at our disposal to make sure that that program is ran right or not at all. That's a senator's job, ladies and gentlemen. Oversight. Oversight of committees, oversight of programs, oversight of budgets, oversight of military activity, oversight of Department of Justice activity. Okay, oversight of so many different things. So many different things. And I think that the U.S. Senate, particularly the Senate Intelligence Committee, would have been thrilled to help out. But the CIA wanted this program to be secret. They didn't want the Senate Intelligence Committee knowing what was going on. Because if they did, chances are the very second that they found out what was happening in MK Ultra, they'd put a stop to it. They'd turn off the financial spigot. They wouldn't allow a single other tax dollar to go into it. And they'd have to find out who all the victims were and pay each and every one of them out of the Treasury of the United States in recompense. The CIA didn't want that. The CIA didn't want its reputation and image harmed by this. So it kept its mouth shut on it. And 8,000 pages of leaked documents led to the CIA's downfall on this. Furthermore, Admiral Turner is saying it's impossible to know who all the victims were. Because mind you, this program ran for 20 years from 1953 to 1973. So he's saying right now to the Senate Intelligence Committee, listen, through Daniel Inouye, who was the chairman, I can't tell you who all the victims were in this program. I can't tell you who the perpetrators were in this program. I don't have that information. A lot of that was kept hidden from the CIA by the people who carried out the program. And due to heavy compartmentalization in the CIA, there were a lot of CIA representatives who, in other departments that didn't work with the MK Ultra crowd, who had no idea such a program even existed in the CIA. It's the same thing with gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen. No one knows, aside from a few people who have read leaked documents, who's behind gang stalking. Okay, from what I've read, it's got fusion center elements in it, it's got DOD elements in it, and it's got DOJ elements in it, particularly the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Homeland Security. If the Department of Defense or the Department of War is involved, it's involved in an administrative capacity. And it's offering a support role to the DOJ. You see? So, ladies and gentlemen, as a man who's experienced gang stalking for 30 years, okay, even though I didn't even realize I was in a gang stalking campaign until I was about 30 years old, right? It started when I was 10. 20 years later, at the age of 30, I realized, based on stuff that I'm reading online, that the things that I've experienced are derived. They're not coincidences, and they are caused by something, a program, a protocol, a government nuance, something derivative of something that the DOD and the DOJ possibly have a hand in. It's called clandestine gang stalking, and it's a human behavior experimentation modification program, and it's a way for the U.S. federal establishment of this country to monitor human behavior under unusual circumstances. So we can collect data on that human behavior and document it for future use, not only for government use, but for corporate use as well. So it's one of those things where you have to figure it out for yourself. If you don't, no one's going to tell you about it. And you have to connect the dots. You have to put it together. You have to organize the data that you collect. You have to make sense of it. You have to compare it to past programs like MK Ultra that have existed in this country. And you have to be willing to look at the totality of the situation and say, okay, looks like the U.S. Federal establishment has authorized a program that could be catastrophic to its image at home and abroad, and it could be seen as cataclysmic to the lives of its targeted subjects. Okay, for me, being a patriot is not just sitting down and taking this covert and clandestine attack mechanism, this disruption campaign mechanism. Okay, for me, being a patriot, ladies and gentlemen, is coming forward about it, organizing my thoughts and my experiential analyses and the data that I have on gang stalking and sharing it with the general public, including our elected officials, so that all parties involved can have some knowledge of what just is it that these people, in the U.S. are talking about. How does it work? Why does it work? How much does it cost? And why is it important? Okay, why is it consequential? Okay, and why is it something that governments, foreign and domestic, need to know about? Okay, the reason I think it's important is because it conflicts with constitutional rights and liberties. It conflicts with constitutional values. It conflicts with the precepts that are present in the Bill of Rights. It conflicts with the precepts that are present in the Declaration of Independence, all of which are the philosophical progenitors of the United States Republic and all the laws and statutes that exist in this country nationwide. Okay? To nullify the concept of inalienable rights, which is the highest set of rights that any person has. Okay? The right to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Those are inalienable rights. No man, woman, child, country, or government can take those from you legally or lawfully. Okay, those are the rights that I'm campaigning for. Those are the rights that I believe need to be protected under the law the most stringently. So if those rights are not being afforded to me or you or anybody in this country as sovereign U.S. citizens, then you have a right under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution to speak your mind and offer your experiential analysis, and you have the right, furthermore, under the First Amendment to the Constitution, to offer your opinion about it. Okay, you're not going to write somebody off and say, well, your life in this country has reached its highest plateau, sir or ma'am, or your life in this country is on the downside, not the upside. You're in the latter part of your life, not the former part of your life, and being a patriot for you is allowing us to do these experiments on you, using your fellow man as the controllers of that experiment, your fellow citizens that you run into on a daily basis. Those are the ones controlling your experiment. And those are the ones that you're going to answer to, whether you like it or not. And by the power of the state, I order you into a gang stalking campaign. Okay, what kind of a life is that? And what kind of a man would I be? What kind of a man would any man be to look at the government and say, okay, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I offer my life unto you as a test subject, henceforth, now, and forevermore? No, that's not what being a United States citizen is about, and that's not what being a citizen of the global community is about either, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to continue on. This document is from the Washington Post. It's dated the 26th of August, 1977. It is by John Jacobs and Bill Richards. It's called The Bizarre Tale of a CIA Operation. Okay, so this is about Operation Midnight Climax. This is a operation that was presented by the CIA to the American people out of whorehouses, brothels, and prostitution networks. The apartment was a small duplex with a magnificent view of San Francisco Bay and with a Central Intelligence Agency spy named Morgan Hall, who had a taste for martinis. For hours, Hall would sit perched on a portable toilet, watching behind a two-way mirror while his employee, a drug-addicted prostitute, entertained unsuspecting visitors and slipped each one an exotic chemical or biological agent. Details of this bizarre scene were supplied in the latest group of documents released by the CIA yesterday, and in interviews with persons familiar with the project, the intelligence agency code Operation Midnight Climax. The 1,647 pages of financial records refer to the San Francisco scheme under the more business-like title of Subproject 42. It pictures Hall as an agent, more possessed with financial worries than voyeurism. Money urgently needed to pay September rent, Hall apparently wrote to his CIA supporters back in 1956, underlining urgently. The financial documents show Hall repeatedly and anxiously reminding CIA headquarters to send more money. His bills for the apartment include Toulouse-Lautrec posters, a picture of a French can-can dancers, and one item marked portable toilet for observation post. When someone apparently rammed a downstairs neighbor's car parked across the street from the apartment, Hall quickly settled up out of his own pocket rather than risk blowing his cover to a nosy insurance investigator, according to the documents. William Hawkins, now an electronics engineer in Santa Clara, California, said Hall used the name George White when he was called to install bugging equipment in the apartment at 225 Chestnut Street in San Francisco. Hawkins, then a part-time student, said he had no idea that the apartment was being used by the CIA. Hawkins said that Hall always referred to the apartment as a pad and kept photos of manacled women wearing black stockings in cabinets by the front window. He kept a picture of martinis in the refrigerator, he said. And he'd watch for a while as I installed a microphone, and then I slipped off. Although Hall called himself George White, bills by Hawkins' company for the bug installations were sent to Morgan Hall. Hawkins said the apartment was listed in the San Francisco telephone directory under Hall's name between 1956 and 1958. Hawkins originally made his information known to freelance reporter Paul Avery for San Francisco radio station KSAN. A second bugging expert who worked on the apartment confirmed the story to the Washington Post. Hall was identified as the operator of the CIA apartment in San Francisco during a hearing in the intelligence agency's clandestine drug and mind control activity by the Senate Subcommittee on Health. CIA officials have said he died 2 years ago. The CIA documents released yesterday were part of the agency's top-secret MK-Ultra mind control experiment program, conducted during the 1950s and the 1960s. Among them is a telephone receipt for $60.50 with a scribbled explanation from Hall. Calls made by addict prostitute while under covert observation, necessary in connection with undercover investigation. The documents list the purpose of Hall's apartment as a place to field test offensive chemical and biological warfare weapons. The project apparently began in the early 1950s and lasted until at least 1965. A memorandum indicates that the project may have extended still later as another CIA program known as MK Search. Other MK-Ultra documents released yesterday described a scholarly project to assess in psychological terms the impact of communist ideology on the population of Asian nations, apparently China, although the name was deleted. And a human ecology study of low-income youth at a basketball playground to discover, among other things, how to channel socially undesirable modes of behavior exemplified in delinquency into more constructive modes. A study of chemical characteristics, LSD and others, as a part of the agency's program to control human behavior. An ambitious project was designed to screen human trials, effects such as an anticonvulsant and an antispasmodic. So ladies and gentlemen, we have a really interesting set of circumstances here with this CIA program called MK Ultra. Excuse me. So it starts off by talking about, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, a drug addicted prostitute that was deputized by the CIA to have sex with Tricks and Johns in a hotel room, in an apartment paid for by the CIA, and behind the mirror in the room, which was apparently a plexiglass mirror, there was a CIA agent named Morgan Hall who was sitting there watching the sexual encounter and observing the behavior of the trick that the prostitute was giving drugs to that were provided to her by the CIA. So it was a way of seeing what the effects of drugs and biochemical agents would be on Tricks and Johns, who purchased the services of Ladies of the Night. So There was another actor named William Hawkins, who was the guy that installed bugging equipment in the hotel room, or in the apartment room. And this was a nice apartment too. Now, this is 225 Chestnut Street over in San Francisco. This was a nice apartment. But it was a CIA-owned apartment that was being used for a drug experiment on Tricks and Johns that were paying for sex with prostitutes in San Francisco. And this particular prostitute, whose name is not given, she used the money from these Tricks and Johns to purchase drugs and necessities during her stay in this very nice apartment in San Francisco, which is a city in California which has a fairly high cost of living. It doesn't say what she charged for sex for each of her clients, but it can be assumed that these were fairly well-paid sexual encounters. And the CIA was documenting the effects of drugs, psychochemicals, or what you might call psychomatic chemicals, being administered to these Tricks and Johns during these sexual encounters by this prostitute. And their reaction to the drugs was being watched live by a CIA agent named Morgan Hall. So William Hawkins, the guy who installed the bugging equipment for Hall to use, as he listened to the prostitute's conversations with the Tricks that she was sleeping with for the night. So the prostitute was likely not aware that a CIA agent was watching her have sex with these Johns in this room. They probably had her think that there was some other experiential data that was being collected during the extent of the operation. She probably was misled as to what the operation entailed, and that there were live viewings of her having sex with Tricks and Johns by a CIA agent named Morgan Hall. So Hawkins, who was the guy who installed the bugging equipment in the apartment, made his information available to freelance reporter Paul Avery for the San Francisco radio station KSAN. And if you'll notice, ladies and gentlemen, this is similar to some things we read about in my COINTELPRO lectures. The CIA during these times worked very closely with local radio networks with respect to getting information about socio-political matters out to the general public. Now, I don't know why this particular guy, Hawkins, who was the bugging agent in this hotel, who put the bugging equipment behind this mirror, I don't know why he gave information to a radio host from KSAN San Francisco. I mean, it's not like the CIA told him, hey, we want you to put bugging equipment in this apartment complex, so when this prostitute brings clients home and copulates with them at night for a fee, we want all of their conversations monitored and recorded on this bugging equipment. And we have another CIA agent named Morgan Hall who's going to be standing behind a plexiglass mirror watching and listening to the encounter as this prostitute has sex with this client and gives him drugs. Now, here's what we want you to do, Mr. Morgan, or Mr. Hawkins. We want you to give all this data concerning this prostitution house and this operation. We want you to give all this data to KSA in San Francisco so that they can have information on it too. It wasn't like that. This was something that Hawkins did on his own. Okay, it's difficult to know why he gave this information to San Francisco radio station KSAN. It's difficult to know why he did that. The article does not make it plain as to why he gave this information to him. So it's a bit strange. But Hall, anyway, was identified as the operator in the San Francisco apartment from an intelligence hearing made by the Senate, particularly the Senate Subcommittee on Health, which exposed that there were mind control experiments happening to these Johns during these sexual encounters with these prostitutes. Okay, so this prostitute was under covert observation by the CIA. She had a phone bill of $60, which is fairly high in these times. This is around 1958. So a $60 phone bill in 1958, that's about a $300 phone bill now. Okay, that's a fairly pricey phone bill that this prostitute had. She was making lots of calls. She was doing lots of business. She was contacting lots of John's tricks and clients, so she could sustain herself as one of the area's premier call girls. She was an escort. And she wanted to be the most profitable prostitute she could possibly be. And in her ambition in making as much money as she possibly could to fuel her drug and alcohol obsession, she had sex with as many San Francisco area Johns as she possibly could. And because of the high volume of tricks that she slept with, the CIA looked at. I mean, the CIA probably had analysts and agents that used her services. And they probably referred her to one of the DDPs of the CIA and said, hey, look, there's a prostitute. She's an escort and a call girl. She lives in the San Francisco area. Sometimes some of the guys here in the CIA call her up and pay her for services. Okay, we think she'd be a good deputized civilian that we could have do experiments for us. Okay, there's no telling how many tricks she's turned, and there's no telling how many tricks she has in her Rolodex. We could gain valuable information if we would have her, as she's turning the tricks, give them surreptitiously LSD and other biochemical agents to see how these tricks, Johns, and solicitors of prostitution, these clients of hers, react to the drugs. We could have a plexiglass window in her room with a CIA agent stationed behind it. Okay, we could let her know what's happening. And of course she's going to commit herself to all of these experiments because she wants as much drug money as she could possibly get from the act of prostitution. So somebody in the CIA looked over at her and said, I think that's a good idea. Let's get some bugging equipment over there. We have some tricks and some Johns to do some experimenting on with this lady. So apparently there were very offensive chemical and biological warfare weapons tested. Okay, these Johns, these tricks, these solicitors of prostitution were under attack in many respects. All right, they were paying a San Francisco area prostitute for sex, and they were being drugged by the CIA in the way of biological and chemical weapons. And there's no telling what the effect of these weapons was on these tricks and on these Johns during their encounters with this high-dollar hoe who sold herself in the 1950s and 60s over in San Francisco. So this project was part of the MK Ultra sub-project MK Search, and there were other MK Ultra documents that were uncovered. One of them was a project to assess the impact of communist ideology on the population of Asia, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, the Asians have embraced communism for a long time. I mean, communism is the preferred political ideology of Asia, typically. And Asia, as a continent, has thrived, succeeded, and benefited from the communist political philosophy. I think that's observable from the outside. I'm not exactly sure what this program or this project. Well, I mean, this is about 60 years ago, this particular aspect of the project. So, I mean, I guess given the less data that the CIA had on Asian attitudes towards communism back then, I imagine that they wanted to know more about Asian attitudes about communism. But I mean, that program that investigation could not have lasted more than 10 years. I mean, Asian governments have made communism work. They've mastered communism. So has a number of Middle Eastern governments. So has Russia. Okay, they've mastered the communist ideology. They've mastered the communist political protocol. And I think that the attitudes of Asians, Middle Easterners, and Russians towards communism is generally positive. Because there's prosperity, there's equal access to resources pretty much. And competition is seen and regulated directly by the government, who seeks to make the playing field as level as possible for everyday people. So human ecology, that's an interesting one, where the CIA was looking at low-income youth at a basketball playground to see how to make their antisocial behavior or their delinquent behavior, how to give these poor basketball playing, park dwelling youths a positive outlook and a positive outlet for their antisocial behavior. Me personally, I did citizen patrol in Kendall, Florida, alongside the Miami-Dade Sheriff's Office for a period of 9 months. And one of the things that I observed were basketball playing youths who, in my opinion, had exhibited violent, hostile, and antisocial behaviors towards a number of people, myself and my significant other included. So one of the things that I took it upon myself to do during this civilian patrol assignment was to watch them. it wasn't necessarily my goal or my my job or my role, okay, to change these young people and make them more appreciative of society and of their country. My goal was just to watch them for suspicious behavior, and I had to make a few phone calls about them, actually. But the fact remains that particular park, Olympic Park, has a crime problem. And this story kind of reminded me of that, because these, I guess, basketball playing youths in this MK Ultra project were supposed to have been examined by the CIA and taught how to channel their antisocial behaviors into something more positive. It doesn't say exactly what, but I mean, some of that stuff is used in gang stalking campaigns. I mean, you got people who are very antisocial, people who are criminally prone, people who are mentally defective, people who are thuggish in their disposition, who are violent and who may have criminal records. You got people like that getting caught up in gang stalking, and all of their antisocial tendencies are now being checked by the people who are giving them signals by which they abide by. Now they have a role in society. Answer to signals like a lapdog. Go from place to place and pester who we tell you to pester. That stops those derelicts and those delinquents from causing any problems in society. Just watch for signals from fellow stalkers and do what they tell you to do. All right, and that stops them from engaging in delinquent behavior, because now their time is being occupied going on stalking expeditions. And there's the old chemical compounds as a way of controlling human behavior. That was also used. So that concludes that particular page. The next page, the next document we have here is from Radio TV Reports Incorporated, based out of Chevy Chase, Maryland. This is a memorandum for the public affairs staff. The television program being discussed is Jack Anderson Confidential. It appears on the WJLA TV syndicated station out of Washington, D.C. This particular show aired February 12, 1983 at 7:30 p.m. The subject is MK Ultra. And the host, Jack Anderson, begins the program with this. 2 decades ago, the Central Intelligence Agency carried out secret experiments on thousands of American citizens. The purpose was to discover ways to control human behavior. The super secret program used unwitting victims as living test tubes for bizarre experiments and mind-altering drugs. The CIA called the project MK Ultra. Now, for the first time, some of the victims have stepped forward. They're former inmates of Atlanta federal penitentiaries, where they were given LSD and other drugs as a part of the MK Ultra program. Now they're suing the CIA for lying to them about the true purpose of the experiment, and also for the mental damage they say they suffered from the drugs sessions. Last week, I sent my associate, John Lee Anderson, to investigate their story. He traveled to Georgia, Florida, and Kentucky. He interviewed the men involved in the sordid CIA affair. Here is what they said. Russell Kirk says, after 1960, I didn't even know what I was doing at times, and it had to be what they gave me in 57 and 58, because I never ever took any drugs before. Anderson continues. Pharrell Kirk was one of the CIA's unsuspected human guinea pigs. He was used as a living medical mixing bowl. What happened to him? He was driven to repeated suicide attempts. Kirk says, I got very depressed because I knew something was wrong and couldn't figure out what it was. And it was just like a voice was telling me, I just soon be dead as to be in this shape. I just soon be dead as to be in this shape or predicament. John Lee Anderson says, so you slashed your wrists? Kirk replied, I did, and they took me and sewed me up and brought me back and put me in the hole. And I begged them not to put me in the hole. They asked me why did I do it? I said I don't know. And I said I just felt like it and I didn't want to live any longer. And he said, well, we've got to put you in there for safekeeping. So I chewed this vein right here while I was in the hole. J.L. Anderson asks, with your teeth? Kirk replies, yes. And when I passed out, when they opened the door to check, I just feel out and they went and gave me a blood transfusion. They put me in a straitjacket, and when they took me out of the straitjacket, I tried to hang myself with the blanket. And I very nearly succeeded. I almost succeeded more with the blanket than I did with the razor blade. Anderson continues. Kirk is not the only one affected by the drug test. His fellow plaintiffs in the lawsuit against the CIA complain of long-term after effects. James Knight, who was another test subject, continues. This is another subject. The Kirk portion of this interview is over. We have a new subject we're talking to here. Is James Knight. He said, I go off occasionally and I've had loss of memory really bad. Several years, some of the experience that I had while I was on LSD, some of them will come back to me. Anderson continues, James Knight is back in prison on a parole violation. He comes from a long line of moonshiners. He was doing time for this offense when he participated in the Atlanta LSD experiments. Like Kirk, Knight said the effect was to turn him violent. Knight says, I was a bootlegger when I started and I never been in no crime of violence or nothing like that. And I got convicted and I've cut several since then and pistol whipped 2 or 3 since then. It's just changed. It's just changed altogether. In fact, no longer than September, I was on furlough and I went home and I beat my wife real bad. J.L. Anderson said, and you never did this before the experiments? Knight says, no, I've never done anything like that before. J.L. Anderson says, you attribute it to the LSD experiments. Knight replies, certainly I do. Anderson continues, Justice Department lawyers handling the CIA's defense refused to be interviewed. They also counseled defense witnesses against speaking to us. But Dr. Lawrence Bryant did come forth. He's a clinical psychologist who worked in the Atlanta prison at the time of the experiment. Sorry, I lost my place. Okay, here it is. He did the psychological screening test of the prisoners who took part in the LSD project. So the host, J.L. Anderson, continues, do you believe as a psychologist and as a person who was there at the time when these experiments were conducted that their claim is justified, that of damages for physical and mental harm done to them as a result of these experiments? Dr. Lawrence Bryant replies, I cannot see that there was any harm that they sustained. They certainly did not tell me about any harm either during the project or any time later on. TV host Anderson continues, this story may never have become known but for the efforts of John Marks. He's an intelligence expert and author of the definitive book on the CIA's attempt to control human behavior. Mark spoke to us about the CIA's reason for the MKUltra project. John Marks is now talking. He says there was an age-old dream in the intelligence business about making people do things against their will, to give you information to perform acts that they didn't want to perform. And the CIA secretly was looking for a pill or a ray or some technique, a panacea, if you will, which would allow them to manipulate people against their will. When the CIA was doing in Atlanta was trying out LSD on people on a captive population. But mainly the CIA was looking for the effect that it would have on certain personality types.